53 players had just conquered the first demon castle in the Tower of Wish. 3 major guilds had fought until they could barely stand. Yet the system announced that a 4th participant had been involved. One individual no one had even seen. That unknown player had earned 17% of the total contribution, killed the mages who had controlled the battlefield, and won the special item lottery. Before the raid leaders could understand how, another notice appeared. An unidentified player had already reached the 6th floor. To understand how Black Lotus moved beyond every ranker in the tower, we have to return to the 5th floor, where Hajin and Boss entered a valley that should never have existed in the finished story. The dwarven supercar tore across the demon realm through ash, black fire, and screaming monsters. Hajin drove while Boss sat beside him in a bear helmet, silently watching a landscape that looked like the end of the world. Their destination was the strange Valley of Darkness, a 5th floor prison camp Hajin had once designed and then abandoned. When he failed to finish his novel, places like this had been discarded with their people still trapped inside them. Now that the world was real, Hajin could no longer treat those unfinished ideas as unused notes. He wanted to rescue the master blacksmith Kedrick, Kedrick's wife Lirko, and every resident enslaved by the demons. Boss asked what they would gain. Haji answered with practical reasons: NPC allies, skills, shops, and future strength. But the truth was simpler. He wanted to finish what his past self had left broken. Inside the valley, darkness swallowed even Boss's vision. When she drifted off course, Hajin caught her wrist.
Follow me. I can see.
She did not question him. She simply let him lead. Then Hajin found a dying shamrock plant, restored it with the orb of regeneration, and heard a heavy impact deeper in the prison camp. Through 1,000-mile eyes, Hajin saw a cloaked man gripping Kedrick by the neck. He ran toward the camp with the Desert Eagle in one hand and Boss's hand in the other. When the valley's dark veil lifted, the stranger was revealed as Bel, the man who existed outside Hajin's original plot and had already interfered with Jin Sayuk. Bel looked at Hajin, then dismissed him. His attention belonged to Boss. He warned her to move away from Hajin, as if he knew something neither of them understood. Boss's face became unnaturally calm. Mana shook the ground. Her eyes turned completely red, and the shadows around her sharpened into weapons. Bel smiled at the woman who was already losing control.
Long time no see, Byul.
That single name was enough to unleash Yasha. Boss attacked before Hajin could ask what Bel had done to her. Yasha Transformation pushed Boss's body beyond its normal limits. She crossed the valley like a projectile, while shadow blades tore cliffs apart around Bel. Bel avoided her by turning into blue mana, but Hajin understood the opening. He wrapped a bullet in Stigma's anti-magic attribute and activated bullet time. The shot struck Bel's shoulder without touching Boss. Forced back into a physical body, Bel could not evade the punch that buried him in the cliff wall. Boss had spent almost everything. Hajin stepped past her, aimed at Bel's forehead, and refused to repeat the mistake of letting him escape. Bel only smiled.
Stay the day plaster, man fight up swick. A so gardle element teeps, but we sit there. But the Plowden supplies at the Lanate Riddell. The Hebel was small to be was not by aware. But father was snow, they gone alumnity. Money got there for his stasser.
Hajin fired. Bel dissolved into tower mana, but Boss kept trying to summon Yasha. She was no longer fighting the man in front of her. She was fighting a memory that had survived for 10 years. Hajin held her tightly, used suggestion, and kept telling her it was over. When her frozen body finally stopped trembling, he warmed her with the orb of regeneration and let her fall asleep in his arms. Bel was gone for now. The questions he left behind were not. Elsewhere in Prestige, Rachel met a group traveling with Kim Suho. One woman among them made every royal court member forget how to breathe. She was Jin Sayan, the divine archer, one of the world's rare master rank heroes, and the person Rachel had admired since childhood. Jin Seon greeted her without arrogance and offered a handshake. Rachel forced her trembling hand to move, unable to believe that the legendary hero was standing inside her guild hideout. The divine archer had entered the tower to rebuild the strength she had lost outside. She also wanted to meet the archer whose reputation was already spreading through every floor. When Jin Seon heard the name Black Lotus, her casual smile became focused. For the first time in years, the existence of a possible rival made her feel young again. While Jin Seon began her search, Hajin returned to the prisoners Belle had left behind. Kedrick believed his magical collar could only be opened by killing Krakon or stealing the administrator's key. Hajin answered by pressing Mystic Key directly into the restraint and turning it. The collar fell apart. Kedrick then led Hajin to Lirko, and the couple escaped while Hajin carried the unconscious boss on his back. When they reached Prestige, Kedrick and Lirko expected the same starving city that had once rejected their relationship. Instead, they found streets filled with trade, residents carrying food, farms producing grain, and work growing around Ryrie shop. Hajin gave them a building with a forge downstairs and a home above it. The city had changed in only a few months, and for the first time, the couple believed they could live openly without returning behind the inner wall. Back at the hideout, Hajin placed Boss in bed. She had already awakened, but mana exhaustion had left her unable to move anything except her eyes. Then her stomach growled. After several seconds of silence, Hajin asked whether she was hungry. Boss answered quietly,
Yes. Sorry.
That quiet admission gave Hajin a chance to ask about Belle. Hajin cooked recovery porridge and fed Boss one spoon at a time. She tried to explain that she did not normally lose control, but he kept interrupting her excuses by placing another spoon in her mouth. When Hajin finally asked who Belle was, Boss turned away. She had been angry when Hajin hid secrets from her, and she knew she could not demand honesty without giving some in return. Belle had once occupied the black seat of the Chameleon Troupe. 10 years earlier, he betrayed the former leader and killed them. Boss had never forgotten his face. She promised that when they met again, she would kill him herself. Hajin accepted her resolve, but warned that she could not throw her life away the way she had today. Boss thanked him for killing Belle this time. Hajin knew the victory belonged to both of them. Without Boss holding Belle in place, the fight could easily have ended with Hajin's death. Then Jain returned. Hajin handed her the bowl and escaped, leaving Boss trapped with someone far too enthusiastic about feeding her and threatening to do it mouth to mouth if necessary. With Boss resting, Hajin turned to the rewards Kedrick had hidden from Krakon. A level 6 treasure chest resisted Mystic Key until Hajin bought item experience coupons from the auction house. After raising the key's unlock effect to level 3, he opened the chest without spending his precious SP. Inside were gems, consolidation tickets, a forging skill book, and 3 pure dark ore ingots. Hajin immediately saw a weapon that would let Black Lotus fight without revealing Fenrir's guns. He forged 5 dark ore arrows and added a simple remote control setting. The next day, he tested them from a ridge above the Valley of Darkness. Each arrow followed a different curve and pierced a demon's throat. Hajin gave a single command,
Return!
All 5 reversed their paths and flew back into his hand. The reusable arrows left almost no evidence. Moving from prison camp to prison camp, Hajin silently killed every guard until only Krakon remained. The administrator answered by preparing a mass teleportation circle for hundreds of soldiers. Hajin answered with Mystic Key. Instead of unlocking a door, he unlocked the mountain itself. Hajin drove the reinforced key into the ground and opened the force holding the ridge together. The mountain began to move. Krakon laughed until the teleportation circle collapsed beneath him. Hajin corrected the demon's name one last time, wished him a good day, and turned away. A controlled landslide poured into the valley, burying Krakon and the remaining demon structures while leaving the human prisoners outside its path. From another mountain, Jin Sion watched the entire event through divine archer vision. She had seen the strange flow of mana and knew the disaster was not natural. Che Nayun only heard the rumble. Jin Sion told her a landslide had buried the valley, but kept one detail to herself. A lone archer had caused it. By the time she looked back, Adin was gone. Jin Sion smiled at the empty ridge, increasingly certain that the mysterious man was Black Lotus. Krakon's death gave Hajin ownership of the valley and everything hidden beneath it. In the center of Prestige, Medea decided that the Dark City had gone long enough without sunlight. She announced a quest for dark ore, pyrogen roots, a shamrock plant, and the essence of the sun from a fifth-floor castle. Hajin already possessed the rarest materials. After finding Krakon's land documents, he claimed the valley, installed automatic miners, destroyed the slave contracts, and returned 16 surviving residents to Prestige. From the mountains of the fifth floor, he also observed how quickly the tower's elite were growing. Aileen and Yi Yongha stood before more than 100 undead and several demons, yet Aileen worried more about remembering how much TP she carried. Then, she declared that hail would fall and split the demons' heads. Her spirit speech became reality. The battlefield disappeared beneath impacts powerful enough to look like a meteor shower. Hajin had dominated the early floors, but the strongest heroes were catching up. He returned to the hideout, where Jin Yohan had arrived as the green seat and the Chameleon Troupe was beginning to gather around Boss. At Kim Su-sho's hideout, Che Nayun told her old classmates that the famous Extra 7 had cured her curse. She proudly asked them to keep their connection secret, never realizing that Extra 7 was the same Kim Hajin she had entered the tower to find. As the Sunlight Quest pulled every faction toward the same conflict, a separate clue surfaced outside the tower. In Paris, Yu Yanha completed a major partnership with Grand Duchess Ah Haeyin. The meeting was a success, and Ah Haeyin even asked when she might meet Fenrir, the archer who had impressed her years earlier at Cube. Yeonhwa declined an invitation to stay overnight, not because the mansion was uncomfortable, but because the bed Hajin had given her had become something she could no longer sleep without. On the way to the portal station, she saw Yoon Sung Ah walking through Paris with a blonde child named Evandel. Yuanta immediately remembered seeing that same girl holding Hajin's hand years ago. The connection made no sense. She searched old messages and discovered that the apartment Hajin had bought with money borrowed from her was leased to Yoon Sung Ah's brother. Facts that should have remained separate began joining inside Yanha's head. Could the child somehow belong to Hajin? Had the hair been changed to hide the truth? Even Yongha knew the theory was absurd, but she could not stop building it. As she denied the possibility, her hair rose in the old habit that appeared whenever her brilliant mind produced something completely outrageous. The next day, Hajin faced a much less amusing problem inside the Chameleon Troupe. Kaeda, the Silver Seat, had entered the tower. Hajin knew his future. The violent criminal would provoke Kim Suho, die inside the tower, and later pursue him in the real world until that hatred caused his permanent death. Hajin had no intention of saving him. Kaeda treated murder and cruelty as hobbies, and if Kim Suho did not stop him, Hajin eventually would. Even Kaeda became obedient when Boss appeared. Her cold gaze reminded him that she had once beaten him close to death. The moment Hajin announced he was leaving, however, Boss's hostility vanished, and she watched him with the unmistakable hope that he would cook for her again. Hajin ignored the request and went to Kedrick's forge. Using Stigma, Dark Ore, and the young dwarf's dexterity, he created 15 more arrows and synthesized them into the 5 reusable ones. Their level did not increase, but their destructive power, penetration, and magic-breaking properties did. They were now strong enough to decide a battle from a distance. Kedrick asked where he was going. Hajin answered simply,
I am going to climb the tower.
On the 5th floor, the first castle raid was already collapsing under demon magic. 3 guilds and 53 players attacked Castle Number 1. Rachel's elementals and Che Nayun's sword kept the front line moving, but 13 demon mages controlled the walls and turned every advance into a struggle. Hajin saw the battle while driving toward the hidden road. He could have continued, but Rachel and Nayun were both inside the killing ground. He decided to repay part of what he owed them without showing himself. From a tree, almost a kilometer away, Hajin placed 5 arrows on the string. The first volley broke through defensive spells and killed 5 mages. Then the arrows arose again along impossible curves and killed 5 more. The balance of the raid changed immediately. Hajin recalled the arrows, returned to the dwarven supercar, and left before anyone could search for the shooter. 30 minutes later, he reached the fairy pond, a hidden passage whose beautiful name concealed mud, filth, and a smell strong enough to make him vomit before he even entered. Hajin removed his armor, held his breath, and forced himself under the surface. 5 unbearable minutes later, space twisted around him, and the system announced that he was the first player to reach floor 6. The most disgusting path in the tower opened into its most beautiful world. Hajin emerged covered in mud and vomit, emptied his stomach, and finally looked up. Splendor stopped him where he stood. The sun and moon shone together in a sky filled with stars. Emerald waterfalls rose from the ground, and a pink forest glittered as though every leaf had been carved from a jewel. For a moment, Hajin forgot everything. Then he remembered the disaster waiting on the 9th floor. His true objective was to reach floor 8 and block the bridge before unprepared players released it too early. Beside the crystal stele, the administrator Irene appeared without a sound. Her first instruction was simple.
Put your clothes on.
She cleaned the filth from Hajin with magic while he dressed in embarrassment. Irene explained that Splendor was peaceful because only 111 people could stay there, each under a personal time limit. Hajin received almost 200 hours, far more than most players would be given. A ticket to floor 7 was hidden somewhere nearby, but leaving early would be foolish. Splendor was a growth floor, and the Spring of Peace could restore stamina, mana, and spirit power as quickly as they were spent. Hajin chose to train before continuing upward. Before he left, the system reported that Spartan had grown and awakened a 3rd trait called Summon. Hajin spoke the command and waited for a portal that never appeared. Then a sharper cry crossed the sky. Spartan was already flying between the sun and moon, larger and more eagle-like than before. He circled once and landed on Hajin's shoulder, as if distance no longer mattered. At the Spring of Peace, Hajin finally relaxed. The water accelerated growth and restored every form of energy, while Spartan floated on his back like a drowned bird until Hajin started laughing. Through the steam, Hajin noticed a black shape moving among the jewel-like leaves. 1,000-mile eyes showed black fur, a shining mane, and a body built for impossible speed. It was Bucephalus, the legendary horse. Hajin forgot that he was still bathing, pointed into the forest, and shouted,
Spartan, go after it!
At the same time, the players below were learning what the unseen archer had done for them. The castle raid ended in victory, but its participants were too exhausted to celebrate. Che Nayun sat with aching arms and watched Rachel recover through elemental breathing. Nayun tried to speak casually, yet the rumors connecting Rachel and Fenrir had been bothering her for weeks. She could barely force Hajin's name past her lips. She finally asked whether Rachel had met him inside the tower. Rachel answered no. Nayun then asked her to keep it secret if they ever did meet, disguising jealousy as a proposal for cooperation between their guilds. Before the awkward conversation could continue, the system calculated the raid contribution. Essence of the Strait received 32%, Frost Sanctuary 27%, and the Royal Court 24%. The remaining 17% belonged to an individual player who had never joined the raid. That same player won the lottery for the special reward. Then, the second notice arrived. An unknown player had reached the 6th floor. Victory gave way to total silence as the guild leaders realized the invisible archer had helped them, and then moved beyond them. At Ryrie Restaurant, Jean Sion heard that 10 mages had died to arrows from nowhere. Aileen arrived with her hands still buried in her pockets, and both heroes admitted they were searching for Black Lotus. When Rachel, Nayun, and the other raid leaders approached, Jin Sion invited them to explain everything. She was not frustrated that another archer was ahead. She looked delighted. Black Lotus was no longer a rumor. He had become the standard every ranker in the tower wanted to reach or defeat. Hajin had killed Bel, secured the Valley of Darkness, created the weapons of Black Lotus, and crossed into splendor before anyone else. But the higher he climbed, the more attention he attracted. Boss still carried a 10-year-old revenge. Yu Yonha had begun uncovering Evandel's connection to him, and the strongest archers in the world were now following his trail. On the 6th floor, Hajin was already chasing Bucephalus. Below him, the rankers were only beginning to understand how far ahead Black Lotus had moved.